Welcome to Four Quarter Lives, a podcast exploring the profound impact of longer, healthier, and more engaged lives, not only for ourselves and our couples, but also for countries and companies. I'm Avivah Wittenberg-Cox, and on this week's Four Quarter Lives, I welcome Tina Backhouse, General Manager of women's health company Theramex. Over the course of just a handful of years, Backhouse has grown a small £1 million startup into the largest operation in the global Theramex group. Women's health is becoming big business, and Backhouse shows us what we need to know to navigate through its risks and benefits. Tina Backhouse's journey into women's health was both unexpected and deeply personal. With over 30 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, she found herself at a crossroads like many of us in her late 40s. Redundancy, loss of confidence, and the search for renewed sense of purpose led her to a new path that focuses entirely on improving women's health across the life course. We'll explore how Tina found her calling at Theramex, a company revolutionizing the way women are cared for, from fertility to contraception, menopause, and beyond. We'll discuss the critical health issues women need to be aware of as they move into their third and fourth quarters, particularly around heart and bone health, and dive into the often overlooked specificities of aging for women and how to prepare for it ahead of time. We'll also do a little bit of myth busting and talk about the taboos surrounding women's health and why the supplements industry has exploded in response to women's health fears. But are they necessary? Tina will share her expert advice on what women truly need to know and the steps they can take to maintain their health and well-being for the long and lengthening run of their lives. So, Tina Backhouse, welcome to Four Quarter Lives. Delighted to have you.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Tina, you're the general manager of Theramex, and maybe that's where we can start, is to explain a little bit first about yourself and your background, and how did you first become passionate, involved, or engaged in women's health?
Yeah, so it is an interesting one. So Theramex is a women's health company. It's a specialist pharmaceutical company just in women's healthcare. That's all we do. And I have worked in pharmaceuticals for about 30 years. And about 5 years ago, I was made redundant, and kind of at a really difficult, as we all know, difficult age where you're...
What age was it?
So I would have been 48, 49.
Very sensitive age, yes.
Yeah, and you're in that perimenopause, you're losing your confidence, you're not sure about what you want to do, you feel that you lack a bit of purpose. Having a purpose has always been really, really important to me. And when I don't have that purpose, I find it quite difficult to kind of
get up in the morning.
Yeah. And also I'm a real move forward person. I always have to be moving forward. I'm not someone that stays in the past. So I found it really challenging, and I kept looking at jobs, but I didn't really want to do any of the jobs that were advertised. And then somebody contacted me who I knew and said, this company is setting up in the UK. It's a global company, but it doesn't have a UK business. And they're looking for someone to help set it up in the UK and take it forward. And at that time, I was a bit like, oh, I don't want to commit to that. But I do love setting things up. I like setting things up from scratch. So that was very attractive to me. So our office was in Sloane Square at that time, which we all loved, but it was hugely awful for us because we just spent all our money on buying things, but in Peter Jones. But so I went into Sloane Square, met everyone, and thought, God, this is really great. This is unbelievable that it's all about women. It's all about women, all stages of their life and the healthcare. So I agreed to go on an interim basis for like maybe 6 months to help set it up. And then, of course, what happened is we went into lockdown and it was COVID. So we had to really struggle to set the business up because all the manufacturing is done abroad, and HRT was becoming a big issue in terms of shortages. So, and the more I got into it, and I just loved the people. It's always about the people, isn't it, in any organisation, really. I loved the people. I love the fact that even though it's a business and we're there to make money for our investors, everyone has that passion and that drive that what we're doing to make a difference for women. And then in that summer, they asked me to be the general manager, and I agreed to stay and build the UK business, which when we first started, the UK business was worth less than 1 million and inconsequential to the whole Theramex family. And last year we did 76 million, and it's the biggest business in the Theramex family. So we've had a huge growth, and it's been
fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it's been, quite a white knuckle ride at times, and, lots of things we didn't really know what we were doing. We started off with 2 people in lockdown, and now we've grown to have many more products and do product launches and do much more exciting things. So I feel like, I was saying this to someone the other day, I always feel like you're probably put in the right place at the right time, and, and things just happen. And I've always been somebody that has never really overthought that kind of stuff. I've always been somebody that thought the right thing will turn up, and it usually has.
That's a good reflection on probably your skills and track record. Tell me a bit more about Theramex. What's the company's vision? When did it start? I mean, and when did this whole interest in women's health really begin, and where is Theramex on that spectrum?
Yeah, so it started, I think, about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was a carve out from a company called Teva. At that time, interestingly, and still until very recently, probably, a lot of big pharmaceutical companies were selling off their women's health products and selling,
Why? Like why? Because
why? That's a really good question, isn't it? One, because perhaps they weren't big enough for, compared to the other products they had. A lot of companies are trying to streamline and be specialists, like cardiovascular companies, diabetic companies, oncology companies. But also there had been obviously a lot of big studies 20 years ago about HRT is dangerous, and the WHI study, which had decimated a lot of the business, obviously, in the UK. So I think it went from 30% of women at that time who could take HRT were taking HRT, and that dropped overnight to like 5 or 6%. It was huge. So,
what's it back up to nowadays?
Nowadays in the UK, interestingly, because everybody thinks everybody is on HRT and knows it, it's still only 19%.
Right, and so it hasn't even come back to...
So it hasn't come back. Obviously, the population is big, so there's more women, but it hasn't come back to that level. And certainly the Department of Health and NHS England's desire is to get it back to that level. And so, but it is interesting because everyone I talk to about that is always really surprised because they think, everyone's on HRT and knows about it. But still, only 19% of women that could take it choose to or can take it.
And what does women's health cover beyond HRT? Are there other...
Yeah, so it's all aspects of women's health. So we go from fertility, contraception, menopause, osteoporosis, uterine fibroids. Our business model is that we don't research and bring drugs to market ourselves. We either buy products from people that are wanting to get rid of them, and we bring them into the market. We continue them in the market. We sometimes partner with people. For instance, we have a product that is being sold by the owner in the US, but they don't have any desire to market it in Europe. So we're the partner for that. So it's many different models, but we're always looking. So we have a very big business development team who are out looking for partnership opportunities, new products all the time, to either say, well, this product is available in all parts of the world, but it's not available in the UK, or it's only available in the US. How can we make it available here? So that's how we work. But it's anything under the umbrella of women's health. Anything. Absolutely. And I say this to people all the time because, I get lots of people reaching out to me on LinkedIn with amazing things. And it doesn't have to be a medicine. It can be any product that we think that will improve women's healthcare. I would say not an app, because I think people always come to me with apps, and I do think the market is a bit saturated with apps for women. But generally, people come with diagnostic tests, with blood, anything like that we think would improve the lives of women and improve their healthcare, then we're interested in.
Okay, fantastic. So now I want to switch a little bit since I have a lot of women listeners on this show, and there's so much debate and I think so much lack of clarity and so much ignorance. I get a little frustrated what I didn't know, 5 years ago. When talking to you, you said, oh, everybody knows about vitamin D. And I never heard of this stuff. So I want to just focus. What do you think are the key things women need to know? You mentioned earlier.
I think the key things women need to know are that, first of all, I don't think women should be afraid of aging in their healthcare, but I think they need to be aware that different things happen to their body. For example, women before they hit menopause, that the estrogen that they have in their system protects them from a lot of disease. And because we have estrogen receptors all over our body, not just in our gynecological area, but all over your body. So for instance, up until menopause, what is the biggest killer of men? It's cardiovascular disease, but not so for women. Once you get past menopause, women catch up really quickly because the estrogen is not giving them that cardiovascular protection.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I've heard through a lot of studies I read that heart disease was the number one killer of women. What I didn't understand was
the number one killer of women post-menopause.
Post-menopause, right.
And so the killers of women post-menopause, cardiovascular disease, dementia, and osteoporosis. But we catch up really quickly with cardiovascular disease. So I think what women need to understand is that you do need to make changes probably post-menopause in terms of the way you live and to protect yourself from that cardiovascular disease.
So can you suggest what do young women under 50 need to know and do, and what do older women over 50 need to?
So I think younger women need to be aware of the hormones. They need to be aware of the contraception they're taking. They need to be aware of all those options to them and keeping healthy weight. But, not so worried about their cardiovascular disease, but really understanding. And also that with women, especially younger women, RCOG, Royal College of Gynecologists, ran a brilliant campaign recently called Not Just a Period. And it's about, don't accept that if you have a heavy period or you have painful periods, it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to accept it. If your periods are making you stay in bed, for 2 days of every month, that's not normal. Right. That's not normal. And you should see a gynecologist, and don't be afraid to do that, because I think women they go, oh, I've just got heavy periods. My mother's got heavy periods. They could have fibroids.
Accept pain and discomfort.
We accept pain and discomfort. And I would say to younger women to really understand that part of their body, really understand their cycles, to really understand what their uterine health is like. And I think younger women are much better at that. My daughter, they track everything on Flow, this app, don't they? They track this. I mean, when we went to the doctor, to see if we were pregnant, and they said, when was your last period? You were sort of going, trying to work it out, all very vague. Now they get out their app and they can tell you. So they're much better at that stuff. And that's really important.
What's the app that you were talking about? Flirt?
So it's called Flow. And they can track their cycle, how many days and how many days of heavy bleeding. It's a brilliant, brilliant app. I think it's free, I think it's a really great app for that. Okay. And then I think as women move into their sort of 40s, first of all, once you get past 40, your estrogen levels are starting to drop. So even if you are not having loads of symptoms, you are starting to go into perimenopause. And, we never really used to talk about perimenopause. Certainly even 5 years ago at Theramex, when I started, people didn't talk about it. But people are getting more and more comfortable with talking about that now. And some people will get symptoms in perimenopause and some people won't. But it's important that women start to understand that maybe things are changing for them. Maybe
do you have any idea what's the ratio of symptoms to no symptoms? I mean, is this a majority of people get symptoms?
They used to say, and the British Menopause used to say, that it was about a third of women that had no symptoms, a third of women that had mild to moderate symptoms, and a third of women that had very severe symptoms. So it kind of works like that. And
there's no understanding of other characteristics that might put you in one of those buckets?
I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot of research going on about, things like weight and things. Does that make a difference? And maybe it does. And there people used to say, oh, it depends what symptoms your mother had, what kind of menopausal periods. But I mean, I don't know how much evidence there is for that. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to the fact of how quickly the estrogen is moving out of your body and all of the other things. So, it's important that women understand that at that point, whether they have symptoms or no, this is something that they will be going through. And also that they have a right to speak to their doctors about that. That lots of women I see on social media say, oh, I went to the doctor and they said I'm too young. Well, there's no ages. Right. We say the average age for a white British woman to have menopause in the UK is about 51. But if you're Asian, it will be earlier. So different ethnicities have it at different times. So you're never too young. And if it worries you and it is a concern to you, then you should go and talk to your doctor, basically. And then I think as you're moving to menopause, post-menopause, and of course, menopause only really lasts for one day.
Yes.
You hit menopause when you haven't had a period for 12 months. It's very binary in that way. It's very frustrating. Lots of women get to 11 months and then have another period and then have to kind of start the clock again. That day you are in menopause, and then the day after, of course, you're post-menopause. But that, that's semantics. It doesn't really matter. But at that point, I think women, we need to be thinking in our late 40s and early 50s about improving our overall fitness and physical health, because we really need to improve the outcome of the cardiovascular issue that will catch up with us, really, and be ahead of that. And that means changing in diet, changing in exercise, and really looking after our cardiovascular health. Until very recently, and even now.
So how does that, there's a lot of talk about menopause, so we hear all about menopause. Yeah. I think really the focus of our health as we get older, basically, you've said, is heart, bones, and dementia, right?
Yeah.
So when you say, we got to change our exercise or change, what do we have? What should women be then? When you focus on heart, does that mean you have to do cardio exercise? Does it mean you have to do strength training? Is there any regime now that should accompany this midlife process? Yeah,
I think what most menopause specialists would say is the important thing is to move.
Yep.
You don't have to go to a gym every day, but if, the biggest, in a recent survey that I saw was about 20,000 women, the biggest exercise that women like doing was walking, right? Which is obviously good for your mental health as well. If you walk every day, if you're careful about what you're eating, obviously do not smoke. And be aware of any cardiovascular history that you have. Is there cardiovascular disease in your family? Have your cholesterol? Having things like being proactive about, and we always say this, don't we, about smears and other tests, but being proactive about going to, if you're invited to a well woman check, go, have your blood pressure taken, have your cholesterol done, know what your numbers are so you know what your risks are, and then listen to your doctors. If you've got high cholesterol, they will give you advice about what you need to do about that. If you have high blood pressure, the same. So really, people get invited to these. I know people all the time getting invited to these well women checks or different checks by the doctor, and they go, oh, I didn't go, But it's really important that we do go, because our bodies are changing. And if you know your numbers and you know your risk, you can do something about it.
What about, I think what often gets less attention, and I certainly never heard about this until I hit it, was bone health.
Yeah.
DEXA scans. So
yeah, absolutely.
Why isn't everybody getting a DEXA scan?
Well, that is a really good, because in this country, as opposed to other parts of Europe, the fracture liaison system service only has a 50% coverage of healthcare of hospitals, and that's according to the Royal Osteoporosis Society.
Yeah, sorry, I don't understand what that means. What does that mean?
So it means things like doing proactive DEXA scans and looking after women.
So what is a DEXA scan? I didn't explain.
So a DEXA scan is just a scan where you go in, you lie on a table, they're looking specifically at your hips and they're measuring your bone density through X-ray. It's just an X-ray, really. And then they give you your risk of fracture for your age. So they do lots of very complicated algorithms that give you a really good indicator of whether you have a high risk of fracture. And that, again, will depend on things like your family history and whether you have that in your family, on if you've had fractures in the past. And again, if you have a fracture, I was talking to someone the other day who said, oh, I was making a cup of tea in the kitchen and I turned and I fractured my ankle. That's not normal. Okay, that's not normal.
There's a natural bone loss that occurs.
There's a natural bone loss, and for some people that occurs quicker than others, and that's the reality.
Aren't the statistics something like 1 out of 2 women in the UK will have osteoporosis fracture?
Yeah, 1 out of 2.
It's not very well known among.
It's not very well known, and the Royal Osteoporosis Society are doing great things to try and. We will work with them to do that as well, for women to know.
Everybody over what age should get a DEXA scan, basically?
I think everyone over the age of, if it was a perfect world, I would say 45, but at least 50.
Okay.
So,
ladies listening, if you haven't had a DEXA scan, get a DEXA scan.
If you haven't had a DEXA scan and you can afford to go and get one, they're probably, I think I had one, it was probably about a couple of £100. And I really felt it's, you get a great report. I don't have any family history, so I'm always a bit sort of nervous about what my risk factors are. And you get this great report that tells you, right, you've got the bone age of someone a bit younger than you, so you're doing well, so you're quite robust. And
I had one and discovered to my shock and horror that I had osteopenia, even though I, exercise and I don't smoke and I do all these things. But then I had to go and really up the strength training.
And that's the thing. If
I'm that ignorant.
Yeah. And it's about knowing, and this is a real passion for me in women's health, is women always put themselves second, right? They take the children for all the checks. They do take them to optician, dentist, but we don't often think about ourselves, on our own health, and know your numbers. Yeah. Find out about this stuff, about if you're worried about this. If you have osteoporosis in your family, say to your GP, I want to have this scan. I want to understand. Know what your cholesterol is. Know what your blood pressure is. All of these things, because these are all things you could do something about.
Okay, so blood pressure, cholesterol, and your bone density through a DEXA.
Yes.
Any other number we should absolutely know by heart?
No, I don't think so. I think those are the main.
Resting heart rate, does that have anything to do with anything?
No, I mean, that comes and goes, and it depends what, in terms of your exercise. I mean, your blood pressure and your cholesterol, in terms of cardiovascular, are the most important things. What I would say to people is, do not waste your money on hormone tests. I see lots of women buying tests on Amazon. I mean, it just appalls me that they're allowed to sell these tests on Amazon and paying for hormone tests. Your hormones fluctuate on an hourly basis, so you are only ever measuring. And if you go to a menopause specialist, unless they're measuring something specific like your sex hormones, like testosterone, then they probably would do one. But for estrogen, they don't need a hormone test to tell you that you're in perimenopause or menopause. So please do not waste your money on hormone tests. I just feel quite passionate because I see a lot of women, or I know a lot of women actually, who are clearly in perimenopause or menopause and do a hormone test, and that day their hormone, and the doctor goes, oh, well, your hormone levels are normal, so it's fine. But it's just a snapshot. Right. So don't waste your money on that, but really focus on your cardiovascular health.
Okay, so we got to move. We got to know our numbers. We can't smoke. I want to lift weights. You got to lift a lot of weights to build muscle and bone, because that's going downhill after menopause. What about this last one that we both hold to, I know, is to drink or not to drink? So the ladies are drinking a little more everything than they used to.
Yeah.
And the WHO and the Canadian government
says nothing.
Says zero, or now recommending zero alcohol. So what do you think?
I think as long as you stick to the guidelines of but again, the reason they're saying don't drink as much is about your cardiovascular health. you know? And so if you're talking to your healthcare professional about reducing your cholesterol, reducing your BMI, reducing your weight, then alcohol's not going to help that. I also think that lots of women perhaps are drinking because they can't sleep. And, you know, sleep is a real disorder in menopause, and sleep is a real risk. Your disturbed sleep pattern is a real risk for your cardiovascular health. So sorting your sleep out is really important.
Yep.
So I would never say to, you know, I'm not a healthcare professional, I would never say to anyone, I would say drink within the guidelines, but don't use it as a crutch for something else when there could be something else that could help you. I don't drink at all. And it's not some kind of moral stance on drinking. At post-menopause, I just couldn't tolerate it anymore.
A lot of women say that. Is there
a lot of women say
that changes in the way we digest?
So they're doing quite a lot of research on that. And there's something maybe about the histamine that is in alcohol and certainly in wine that can really bring out bad results. But honestly, I mean, I could easily drink my way through a good bottle of vodka and be standing. You know, I was that kind and be absolutely fine. You know, now if I have one drink, I feel like I could lose like 2 days, you know, with a bad headache. So I just made that choice not to drink. And that does happen to a lot of women. So your body is changing, I guess. So, but I think listening to the guidelines and again, looking at the reputable data out there, you know, not listening to quacks on Instagram, but really looking for what is the latest research, what is the latest data that can tell us about this, and talking to your doctor or your nurse or your pharmacist. I would really recommend. Pharmacists are fantastic at all this stuff. They're really interested in menopause. We're always getting pharmacists begging us for training on it, and they really want to help women, and they've got a really good view of all the other things you're taking, all the other diseases you have. And in these days where I know some women are struggling to see their GP, then I would say don't forget your pharmacist. Go and talk to your pharmacist. If you can't sleep, if you're having these difficulties in menopause or post-menopause, then go and speak to your pharmacist.
That's, I think, great advice. Go listen to actually qualified people. I want to turn a little bit to, there's so much noise now in this space. There's so many myths and taboos, and also like this massive market of supplements for almost everything you have heard of. So tell me a little bit, what myths and taboos surround women's health that we should really dump?
I think, there's a lot of myths and taboos. So I think when I, again, trawl through what people are saying, one of the myths is that people seem to think there is a golden age when you are menopausal or not menopausal. And I hear a lot of women saying, I went to my GP and they said, I'm too young. Well, they don't know that. Right. Women in their 30s can go through menopause if they have PCOS or they have other gynecological things. So that's a myth. Your age is irrelevant to a certain degree. I think the other thing that is a bit of a myth is people thinking, my ethnicity means that I can't talk about menopause or I won't be understood about it. And that's really important that we break down those barriers as well, is that if you're Black or you're Asian or you're Chinese or you're what, you still have menopause, right? And, there's a belief that some cultures don't. Everybody has menopause. And also,
I think more or less symptoms in certain populations?
They might have different symptoms. So they might have more prevalence of certain symptoms. I think that's fascinating, that research, actually, that is just starting to be done in terms of what symptoms do Black women present more. For example, we know that Black women get uterine fibroids more than white women. And all of these things are really, really interesting and need a lot more research done around them. I think the other thing is that if you go to your GP, and this does happen, and, the majority of GPs want to help and are good, right? The majority of GPs you see in this country are good. But sometimes you will go and the GP says, we don't deal with menopause. We don't prescribe for menopause here. And even though you are 51% of the population, and we have an absolute right to be looked after in primary care, as we do when we're pregnant. So if you are going, and the research says that it takes the average woman 5 visits to their GP to actually get something for their menopause and have their symptoms taken seriously. They might have been prescribed antidepressants in that time. They might have been prescribed other things. So if you are not getting
how
anywhere,
can we still be there in 2024? 5
well,
visits?
because only now we've decided that we have to train it as mandatory training in their medical education. Only now have we decided that we need to do that. So for older GPs, they weren't even trained in it. In
women's health and different gender differences across. Really?
In menopause, in women's health generally, it was just a case of, well, you kind of like, you deal with it. You have periods, you deal with it. And
how did it get suddenly integrated? When did this happen?
So in the last couple of years, so through a lot of campaigning, really. Okay. But if you go to your GP and you're not getting any sense, or you know they won't help you, go and see someone else.
Yep.
That is, people say to me all the time, "Oh, I've been to see my GP 5 times." Well, go and see someone else.
Okay, so change your GP. If they're not listening, change them. That's good advice.
And you have a right to be listened to, because women know their own bodies, right? So if there is a change, if you feel that your body, then you know, right? And you have that right to be taken seriously. Don't let someone tell you you're too young, you're too fat, you're too white. All of these things, or, you know, you can't be in menopause. If you know your body, and go and find somebody that does. And actually, if you go on to the British Menopause website, it will have lists in your area of menopause specialists as well that you could contact if people wanted to.
Okay, now tell me about supplements, because that is an industry that is listening to women and is serving up remedies for almost everything. Under, what do we think of that? And what should women be taking, if anything?
I think that it's a billion pound
dollar business, yes.
And if you go into supermarkets and look, I mean, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? The amount that's on the shelves now. And supplements, some of those supplements will be useful because they'll be researched and done, and some of them will be less useful because they don't have to do placebo-controlled trials in the same way that, you know, pharmaceutical products. There's no proof
at all.
But of course, you know, some people will say, I took this and it made me feel better. Well, that's great. But, you know, some people will say that about placebo, right? Yeah. So, and it makes them feel better. So I am of the view that if you think it makes you feel better, then that's fine. But what I'm not of the view about is I'm not of the view about women being exploited where they feel that they're not getting help from their doctor or their pharmacist and not being listened to. So they feel that only they have to go and spend money in the supermarket and buy. They're not inexpensive supplements. Yeah. And actually, you know, we have the HRT exemption certificate in this country, which means that you get a year's worth of HRT for one prescription charge. So for some women, economically, if they're spending, you know, 50, 60, some women hundreds of pounds a month on supplements, are they doing that because they can't? If they want to do that and they've made the decision to do that, that's fine. But I don't like the idea that maybe other women feel that that's their only option. Yep. And also to understand that, you know, what data there is, and there's little data. I think there are things that you can do that are very well researched. So taking vitamin D, for example, is absolutely...
So when we spoke earlier, you said everybody in the health profession knows that we should be taking vitamin D, but I didn't. So why and who and at what age? And is everybody supposed to be taking this? And why don't we?
I think everybody should take vitamin D because it really helps with your bone strength. Yep. And so, and again,
which we repeat hits 1 out of 2 women in the UK that their bones are failing.
So go and speak to your pharmacist about what dose is a good dose to take. But I would say vitamin D is very well researched, and certainly most women I know are taking vitamin D. A lot of women take magnesium because they say it helps them sleep, and there's quite a lot of data around that as well. So that can be helpful. And again, there's all the fish oils and all of those things that do have data. Yeah. But again, I would say, even if you're going to go and buy it in Tesco, speak to your pharmacist, get their advice. Say, you know, this is what I'm thinking, this is my age, what things would you recommend? And they will give you really good advice around that as well.
Fantastic. Tina, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I think we've gone through sort of essentials that women should be thinking about. So bones, heart, and dementia, a kind of focus for the Q3 woman, and know your numbers. Bone density, blood pressure, and cholesterol. So I think that's really good advice. And don't listen to all the hogwash. Go talk to your pharmacist or your GP.
Exactly. And don't be afraid if you're not being listened to, find someone else who will listen to you.
Yeah, I like that. And at home and at work and in health, right? That's a kind of across the board recommendation.
Exactly. And go on the British Menopause Society website. There's lots of really good information on there. And I'd really encourage women to do that as well.
So, Tina, you know my last question. I ask all my guests to give me 4 of their own 4 quarters. What would be yours if you look back and forward?
Yeah, so I think my 4 quarters would be survive, exploration. The 3rd quarter would be dissatisfaction. And I think the 4th quarter is peace. And that's how I see it. So, yeah, if I'm being really honest, I think that's how it is. So,
can you give me a word about your Q3? Because that's an unusual one from
dissatisfaction. Yeah. So I think either a lot of things happened, or so my divorce and all those different things that made me dissatisfied. And I think I'm going through that now. And I think that, I'm okay with that. And I think it was part of my growing. But I don't feel that I knew who I am until now. And because I was so busy trying to be as good as other people or do all these things to have a perfect life. But I was never authentic about myself. And now I feel that I'm authentic about myself, and also I'm okay, and I'm at peace, because if people like it or no, that's okay. I'm okay with that. So if you like it, that's great. If you don't like it, that's fine. So I'm not worried by that. So I feel like dissatisfaction, it's a strong word, isn't it? And it's not a nice word to describe part of your life, but I think that is the realistic situation, that I have been dissatisfied with quite a lot of areas of my life, and mostly myself, actually.
Interesting.
So
I like a lot of what you've said and who you are. And I appreciate so much that you're sharing it so honestly and forthrightly. I think this will help an awful lot of readers
wonderful
become more satisfied themselves with this.
Thank you. And thank you for doing it, because it is a really important subject. So I really appreciate that.
It is indeed. I will talk again soon and check in with the latest research. Good luck with the next year and the fall.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye. For more thinking about the impact of our 4-quarter lives, you can read my column at Forbes and subscribe to my Elderberries newsletter on Substack. Let's design lives that aren't just longer, but better.